the difference is between, are you tapping into extrinsic or intrinsic motivation, right? And so when I pull out an incentive, as a company leader, if you hit this goal or exhibit this behavior, you will get a reward, right? So that's an external carrot that like, hey, this is a desired and valuable behavior or outcome for the company. And I want everyone working towards this, right? And so that's very much kind of extrinsic motivation. Recognition, a lot of times, is after the fact, right? Andy, you're doing a great job as a, up and coming product manager, and you're putting in the hours just because you care about your work and you want to do better. After the fact, you get recognized by your boss as saying, hey, thank you for putting in this hard work and here's a reward. That's more intrinsic motivation. And so you'd be recognized, and I would call that recognition more so.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Kevin Yip. Kevin is the president and co-founder at Blueboard. Now, there's no doubt that sales leaders across teams of all sizes are facing some tough challenges right now. In our conversation, Kevin and I dig into what sales leaders should be doing to balance how they motivate and support their teams using sales incentive and sales recognition programs. So we dive into how incentive programs should fit into an overall recognition strategy, because research is pretty clear that sellers actually are more motivated by recognition and visibility perhaps than by pure cash alone. We dig into what a successful incentive program looks like. We get into what the distinction is between a recognition program and an incentive program, and talk about how non-monetary incentive programs can impact performance and have a big influence on retention of top talent. So we get into all this and much, much more. But before we get to Kevin, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, let's jump into it with Kevin. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Andy. Excited to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So tell folks about you and what you do.
My name is Kevin Yip. I'm a San Francisco native, living in the inner Richmond in San Francisco near the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
I started a company with my best friend from high school. It's called Blueboard. Yep. And what we do is we help companies reward, recognize, and incentivize their employees with experiences. Mm-hmm. And so it's all experiential based. Typically the status quo has been, give out cash, gift cards, plaques, a blender. We think it's all a little boring and outdated. And let's give something more meaningful and something you can share with your loved ones. Anyways.
Well, we'll get into that. So what was the impetus to start the company? Because, looking at your background, there's nothing obvious in your work background to say, hey, let's start a company about employee recognition or incentive business.
Totally. My 1 year of work experience before starting this company. So I was a auditor, very fun and sexy job at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Mm-hmm. And I was placed on a project. In the beginning of it, had a couple team members quit, and we weren't able to replace them on the team. And so it was, being the only first year associate, I had to take on all their work. Good opportunity for me to step up. And so I did. And what that kind of required was, 7 days a week, mm-hmm. 12 to 15 hour days, 100-hour weeks for about 2.5 months. And I did really well. And my life completely fell apart outside of work. I gained 25 pounds. I was stressed, anxious, and my girlfriend at the time, and now ex-girlfriend, was on the verge of breaking up with me. Right. And at the end of it, my manager came up to me and said, Kevin, the partner and I really want to thank you. And boom, it handed me an Amex gift card. And being completely burnt out in the state I was in, it was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. But rather than feeling appreciated, valued, oh, this was all worth it, it felt kind of like a slap in the face.
Here's a $50 Amex gift card.
Totally.
Actually, do you remember how much it was for?
It was for $200.
Yeah,
right?
even still. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's a multi-million-dollar project. I've put in hundreds of hours of overtime. And so it's, less than $1 in overtime, right? And which was what was something that was supposed to be really well intentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I took like the complete opposite way, right? And so I went back to where I was living, and my roommate at the time, now my co-founder, um, had also been getting a lot of gift cards and things like that from Accenture. And he's like, what's crazy about all of this is think about all of the work that PwC and Accenture have to go through to get us these gift cards, right? HR has to budget it in. Now I know each company spends millions of dollars a year on this. My manager had to go ask for approval, had to pick up the gift card, multi-level approvals from HR, from the partner, and then finally deliver it to me. And even after all of that work, um, did not have the intended effect, and actually was demotivating and
Right. The opposite
disengaging.
effect. Right.
Yeah, and so our thought around Blueboard was kind of going through this like kind of gift card recognition, so to speak. We thought of like, oh, what would be something more like personal that we would care about? Hey, if my manager had come up to me and said, "Hey, Kevin, I know you've been really frustrated with your health. You've been eating, pasta and filet mignon on your per diem, at the office every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you love boxing. Why don't you take a boxing membership to the gym around the corner,
Right.
right? Or hey, how about you and your girlfriend, you haven't spent time together for the past couple months, take her out to a nice dinner date, maybe a cheese and wine pairing class.
Or take it to
Same,
Hawaii.
or take her to Hawaii. Not on
Yeah.
$200 though, but
Yeah.
the same cost as the gift card, right? But imagine how much more personal, thoughtful that would have felt for me as this hardworking employee. And that was kind of like the aha, was like, hey, if we can help companies deliver experiences that are personal, that are meaningful to employees, we thought people would eat it up. And so we quit our jobs soon thereafter and started Blueboard.
So what was sort of the first product you had?
So the first product, and it was not like, it was a winding road, was actually like, it was a very simple like point and click web app,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hey, let's deliver some points to an employee, and then they can use the points to buy something.
Right.
And we got a couple customers with that. But what we found was that the points would just kind of, people would want to build things up, save up for something, and they would almost like never use it. And so it was like this like hoarding mechanism that we
Mm-hmm.
didn't really intend. And so we kind of shifted to kind of change the model where every single reward and incentive you redeem immediately to a menu of experiences. So there's no points accumulation, there's no currency, which is pretty different than kind of most of the other players,
Yeah.
among other things.
Right. Most of the incentives are recognition houses. So when you talk about experiences, and I've done at least one myself, is tell people sort of the range of things that when you talk about experiences, a range of experiences that people can have.
Yeah. So, we do anything from going skydiving for the first time, learning how to make, gnocchi in Italian cooking class, to learning a language. And then at kind of the upper bounds, lots of travel experiences, learning to surf in Hawaii, taking your kids to Disneyland for the first time, hiking Machu Picchu. And I think one of the things we say is that experiences are universal, preferences are different.
Mm-hmm.
And so like as we now have, 500 plus kind of customers, tens of thousands of employees kind of going out on experiences kind of every quarter. And so our aperture for like what an experience is has like definitely widened.
Mm-hmm.
When we first started, it was very much about adrenaline and like, whoa, what would we like to do?
Right.
Right. And that's where we started because that's what we knew.
Yeah.
And that's, very much broadened and continues to broaden over time.
Yeah. So it's not what two young guys would want to do, but what a broader spectrum of people might want to do.
Exactly. And so, I think as important as the experience is almost kind of like that, the memory itself that
Mm-hmm.
gets kind of created from the experience. And so when you think of these hardworking employees, right, um, in a company, and you're able to like give them something, and we have, people proposing on Blueboard experiences, recreating wedding anniversaries, going on baby moons, crossing things off their bucket list, right? This is like in life, this is what people really cherish and value.
Right.
And to do that on behalf of great work, on behalf of your company,
Right.
is something really powerful, right? It creates a lot of connection, a lot of loyalty, and pride.
I can guess what a baby moon is just by the words, but I have to admit, it's the first time I've heard that expression.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Honeymoons too.
you guys offer a baby moon?
That's probably one of the stories that's had like probably stuck with me the most over the years was a an employee had gotten a Blueboard experience for their like I think 10-year anniversary at a
Mm-hmm.
company, and went on a baby moon, and ended up going to see the Northern Lights, and ended up naming their daughter Aurora
Aurora.
because of it.
Better than
Um,
Borealis, yes.
better than Borealis, but that was pretty meaningful, right? And obviously they're going to remember that for the rest of their lives, and I kind of in other ways of thinking about it, out kind of pulling myself out of the grind of running the business, like it feels like an honor that like we're able to help make that happen.
Right. So when you're trying to sell the service to companies, I mean,
Hmm.
how are you positioning it? As a employee recognition, or purely incentive, or President's Club replacement?
Yeah, yeah. And so we started selling to HR teams, right? And so that was kind of around anniversaries and recognition. There's specific programs that HR kind of uses.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, um, you know, if you can figure out a way to sell the sales, right? Um, that can be, compared to HR, right?
Yeah.
More budget, quicker decision making. That can be good. We were kind of naturally being kind of pulled in to sales teams through our existing customers. Sales leaders would hear about, would see the anniversary programs or this employee referral incentive that HR was running, and they'd be like, "Oh, we could use that for sales contests and for our spiffs." And so we, kind of naturally moved over to the sales side as well. And so those are our two main buyers, HR and sales. I think, how we position it, um, to the buyers, like one is, do they get experiences, right? If you don't think experiences are valuable, then you're not going to buy Blueboard, right? And
Right.
I think over time since starting, I think that has the sentiment in the market has kind of very much evolved where like I think fundamentally like most people just understand the value of an experience and what that means. And I think our kind of challenge over the last couple of years is, well, so what? I love experiences. I do them all the time. I love traveling, right? How does that help me sell more?
Right.
How does that help me motivate my employees? How does it keep them longer?
Right.
Right. And so it's been on us to develop these types of programs that actually drive real business value beyond just happy employees. Right.
Well,
And
let's talk about how you're measuring that. I mean, what are your customers experiencing? Because there's been sort of this double whammy, sort of. I don't completely overlap, but I mean, Great Resignation. Now we've got a recession. Uh, People are even more concerned now about retaining the top talent. But there's
yeah,
also you got sort of a motivation issue because oftentimes in the face of a downturn, sales gets a little scared. They get a little stuck. They need perhaps a little extra incentive.
yeah.
So what are you finding?
So, and I'll maybe talk specifically about kind of incentives just to kind of maybe be more specific, right? What we're seeing and is first off, we make sure kind of in the beginning of the customer journey that the program is well designed and established, right? With kind of a faulty design and like maybe lack of kind of spending time thinking through a program structure, no matter how good Blueboard is, like it's going to be less effective, right? And so like our sales teams motivating the right behaviors, is it tied to the overall strategy? Is there operational support to actually track and measure these things, right? And from there, it's like, okay, well, from there, it's like, hey, let's create an incentive. Let's do a lot of communication, a lot of internal marketing, right, to get a lot of people excited and bought in. And, from there, people work towards it. There's management continually communicating it. And we've seen that whatever that behavior is, activity spikes, right? So whether that's, people will, a new framework, in sales, and if it's a new framework of how to run a discovery, or is it introducing a new product, even though, you have a core kind of cash cow product that's easy to sell. And so whatever that behavior or initiative is, we see much more activity because of it, right? And I think that what's interesting is often companies don't think of it, and leaders don't think of incentives. They think of it more like campaign and episodically.
Right.
What we see is that the second incentive is even more powerful, right? And that's because companies launch the program, they have the incentive. They're like, oh, what is this Blueboard incentive? After those first winners get the reward, they go out on the experience. They're talking about it. We might have video content. People are posting about it. Then it makes it even more real to the rest of the organization and kind of just drives kind of more adoption, more top of mind around the incentive. So,
and I take it these incentives are used mostly in a more structured fashion as opposed to what your bosses did when you were at PwC, which was, hey, spur of the moment, Kevin did a great job. What can we do for him? Type thing, is it more structured, or is and maybe anecdotally what you're hearing from customers, which way is it most effective?
Yeah. So this is a loaded question because kind of recognition and incentives, like there's generally multiple tiers, right? So the way I got recognized is what kind of people refer to as kind of informal kind of rewards and recognition, right? And so how are you empowering kind of on the ground managers, leaders to recognize employees on the spot and in the moment, right?
Right. And in the moment being critical, I think.
In the moment being very critical.
Yeah.
And there's a F-22 or something.
Yeah, F-22 right overhead. Blue Angels.
Fleet Week in San Francisco. Blue Angels.
Yeah.
The second piece, right, is very much, incentives, anniversaries are very much more formal, right? And there is a structure in place. And so, like, we see both. And oftentimes, like, with our customers, like, they are doing both with us, right? They each have kind of their own different value. Yeah.
Well, is there, when it comes to things like President's Club, especially I think during the pandemic, as people wanted to get together, I think this idea of having these curated experiences that don't require you to see your boss in a Speedo in Cancun, probably picked up in popularity. Is this a trend you see, that sort of personalized President's Club as opposed to, hey, let's get everybody together offsite somewhere?
So we did a lot of business in these personalized President's Clubs over the pandemic, right? And one, for the simple reason is group trips just weren't happening. Right. Since then, and this is what we expected, there's been a large appetite for getting teams back together, right? Because a lot of folks haven't seen each other in years. And so President's Club, as it kind of traditionally was, has kind of like come back. And I think like what's been interesting though is part of the kind of the criticism of President's Club, if you will, is that it is this huge thing. It's very experiential based. People really care about it. But, 2, 3, 4 months into the year, you kind of already know who the winners are going to be. And so it becomes less of an incentive and more about recognition, right? And so like kind of our thing is, how do you take kind of the essence of like what makes President's Club special? It's experience based, it's personal, like there's a lot of like it feels different than most incentives.
Right.
And how can we do that more periodically throughout the year than just one big thing every year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you distinguish between incentives and recognition? Is one more formal and one less formal? Is that?
No, actually. So yeah, it's a great question. I think of, almost the differences between, are you tapping into extrinsic or intrinsic motivation, right? And so when I pull out an incentive, as a company leader, if you hit this goal or exhibit this behavior, you will get a reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an external carrot that like, hey, this is a desired and valuable behavior or outcome for the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I want everyone working towards this, right? And so that's very much kind of extrinsic motivation.
Right.
Recognition, a lot of times, is after the fact, right? Andy, you're doing a great job as a, up and coming product manager, and you're putting in the hours just because you care about your work and you want to do better. After the fact, you get recognized by your boss as saying, hey, thank you for putting in this hard work and here's a reward. That's more intrinsic motivation. And so you'd be recognized, and I would call that recognition more so.
That was more informal in the sense that while you were working, you didn't really have a sense of, if I do a great job, I'm going to get, this experience as a reward.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having a high performance culture, programmatically, you need both, right? Because you never want to kill. The more carrots you put out there, right? You don't want everyone being kind of, call it mercenarial, right? And that's kind of on the extreme end, right? You want people to have this internal buy-in and kind of, they're feeling aligned to the mission, aligned to the purpose in their job, right? And so that's like, recognition is really good at kind of building and encouraging that. At the same time, there's going to be different processes, initiatives, products that will be hard for people to change their habits, right? You might be behind on a goal and you might need to focus on this one aspect of the business. That's where incentives are really powerful. And so a blend and balance of the two can create, I think is, much needed in creating like high performance culture in any organization.
And I was going to think, what are the KPIs? I'm thinking from a manager standpoint, what are the KPIs I'm going to use to measure the effectiveness of the ROI on this incentive? And I'm sort of curious too, is sort of what's the average sort of price point on that you're seeing from your clients in terms of experience? I mean, is it a cup of beer, or is it dinner out, or a trip to somewhere?
No. Two great questions. I'll answer them in reverse order. You can't, and I think one of the things I struggle with a little bit, and I think experience the term might be one of the most overused words in the last decade. So that's been interesting, right? We don't consider, at least on Blueboard, right? We don't consider, like a beer, having a beer or, ticket to the movies as like kind of an experience we would offer, right? It is an experience, but like the dollar point is too low for us that like we wouldn't be able to deliver on multiple different preferences at that low dollar value. And so like our minimum is $150, going all the way up to $25,000.
Oh,
In terms of frequency, probably 500 and 1,000 are our most used sent
what's
experiences.
what's the $25,000 one?
Ooh, so a lot of travel stuff. I think recently I saw one person, they did a trip to Morocco, Marrakesh, had took a car safari out into kind of the Sahara, stayed at this oasis luxury resort, sandboarding, kind of camel riding, things like that. And so I think that was the last $25,000 experience I saw
And
go in.
any idea what the person did in order to earn that?
So that person was the owner and kind of like brainchild, I think, of a new product rollout that ended up exceeding goals, tens of $1 million in business impact. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
let's go work for that company.
Yeah. What's there not to like about something like that?
Well,
Anyways,
yeah. Well, and the thing is, though, you really only have to, once you've done that once, the expectations are sort of set, but it's like, yeah, that motivates people. Think, yeah, I don't know if no one's promising me anything, but hey, if I really knock the ball out of the park on this initiative, we're working on this program, this product rollout, or whatever, something like that could happen. That's
yeah.
kind of cool.
And what's interesting, and this was after the fact we learned about this program, but Google in the early days had this recognition program called the Founder Awards. Have you heard of it?
No, no.
So Founder Awards are basically given to employees that displayed founder-like qualities,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the the person who started Google Maps, got a founder award.
Got it.
A person who did a breakthrough on kind of search query like speed also got a founder award. And it was basically a stock grant up to $1 million in Google stock. This is in the early 2000s, and so
That'd work as well.
yeah. But it was interesting. Incredibly, like that is and if they held on, it was incredibly lucrative, right?
Right.
But what they found was after a year or so of running the program is that, Andy, if you launched Maps and got $1 million stock grant, and I launched Gmail and got 800,000, I wasn't happy or appreciative that I got 800,000. I was mad and upset
Those
that you got
$200,000.
$200,000 more than me, because I think Gmail is just as big and valuable as Google Maps,
Right.
right? And so even though it was probably one of the more lucrative recognition program budgets in history. I think they spent $50+ million on the program, and that actually that has turned out into billions of dollars in actually like market cap today.
Yeah.
It didn't breed loyalty, appreciation. It kind of created and stoked this toxic environment of like comparison. And it was interesting, right? So
all you can say is people are horrible.
and so what they did was they scrapped the program and gave everyone trips to Hawaii, and across the board, people were happier.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the things that I think we've cracked is that experiences, you might want to go, spend time and get a nice guitar and take, guitar lessons every week for a year.
Yeah.
And that might make you incredibly happy. And I want to, go, hike Machu Picchu and, feed the alpacas up there. And yours might cost, 20,000, mine might cost 5,000, but they're non-comparable, right? Because it's like what's important to us. And so I think that's one really powerful thing we've cracked is this experiences aren't really comparable. I go back to this Teddy Roosevelt quote. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Right.
And so I think we've in these programs at least gotten rid of comparison a lot, which is cool.
Yeah. So just mechanically, how does it work? I mean, in terms of people, there's a there's a website, obviously, with a catalog of offerings.
Yeah. And so we have this whole kind of software, right? And we call it our experience delivery platform, right? And this is kind of the core product that customers buy, right? There is the software to basically run programs, right? How do you provision accounts? How do you set up a budget, approval flows, et cetera, right? Configurable enterprise software, right? Boom. Then there's the experiences, right? Curated experiences that we put the marketplace together. And those are global. Last year we did, experiences on over 70 countries. And then the final piece, which is a bit of the service side, is every experience that somebody gets rewarded on has a personal concierge. And so they help with all the scheduling and booking of the actual experience. So that might be as simple as, scheduling your first guitar lesson with your instructor in San Diego, all the way up to planning, flights, hotels, accommodations, dinner reservations, and your sailing cruise on your beach getaway. And so that's kind of those three parts: software, experiences, and concierge, kind of make up our core platform.
So, interesting. A couple of final questions, or sort of getting near the end here. Is again, what are you hearing from your customers in terms of how this is working for them? I mean, are they seeing more sellers hit quota? Are they seeing greater productivity growth? I mean, what are the dimensions they're seeing that they look at to say, okay, we want to extend this for a second year or whatever?
Yeah. So HR is our core buyer, and that's where we have the most data. And the first and main thing they look at is engagement data. And so companies have become, and HR teams and people teams in particular, have become really sophisticated with tools like Qualtrics, Culture Amp, Glint on, are people motivated to actually work, right? Are they engaged?
I think that's right.
Are they engaged, right? And they kind of splice this into a number of different dimensions. And so what you can do is you can actually, if you have launched Blueboard, right, over the course of the year, you can see, hey, what teams are using Blueboard and how are they engaged versus teams that aren't? How are individual people who have received Blueboard experiences and been recognized with Blueboard engaged with those that aren't? And across the board, you can see that teams that use Blueboard are more engaged. Employees that get recognized with Blueboard are more engaged, right? Now, what do they use engagement for, right? Hey, they kind of see that that's the proxy for performance. There's a very strong correlation between engagement and performance. And there's a very strong correlation between engagement and retention.
Yeah.
Right.
All makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I remember the last study I saw on engagement was under 40% of employees are engaged or something like that. So yeah, it's a big gap to fill.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. So on the sales side, given kind of the nature of incentives being campaign driven, it depends on the metric and on the behavior they're trying to drive. But we launched a sales incentive app recently. Before, it was very much just experiences for hitting an incentive. It was all outside of our product.
Right.
But what companies are starting to do is kind of driving that. How do you drive that second incentive? Right. And so they're actually, who is the top AE that hit the incentive that, went to the, set 50-yard line at the 49ers game, right? Let's bring that person up. Let's take pictures. Let's have them tell their story, how they hit it and why they got super excited about it. And so anecdotally, what we're seeing is sales leaders, sales ops, getting the full story of performance and reward and then bringing that and using that as marketing material back to the rest of the org to drive kind of more engagement, more activation in the next incentive.
Got it. All right, last question.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest experience that you've given somebody in your company?
Ooh, so we have a lot of different. We drink our own champagne, so to speak.
Yeah.
But one of the cooler experiences that somebody did was this person's mother had never been to Asia, and she wanted to basically. It was like basically a surprise travel experience. She told her mom, "Hey, we're going to someplace warm. We're going to be gone for 10 days. This is all you're packing. I'm not telling you anything." And they show the airport. "We're going to Thailand." Boom, they go to Thailand. And every single day was a surprise to the mom.
Yeah, great.
Unveil the itinerary, things like that. But that was one of the cooler rewards and experiences that like we got to kind of deliver, and it was all captured on video.
And was it an incentive for that person or recognition?
It was recognition.
Got it. What'd they do?
They hit it was a mix of they hit their like I think it was 5-year anniversary with us, and they had just been promoted kind of independently around the same time.
Oh, very cool.
It's kind of a 2-for-1, if you will.
Like it. All right.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask my employer about that. Oh, wait. I work for myself. So I'll have to get on that. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me. If you want to learn more about Blueboard, what's the best way to do that?
Check us out on the website, the interwebs, www.blueboard.com. If you want to reach out to me, shoot me an email, kevin@blueboard.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Yeah, those are the best ways.
Perfect. Kevin, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Andy, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank our guest today, Kevin Yip, for sharing his insights with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you for your help with that. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.